The Beer and Pretzel podcast and Trash Talk podcast are part of the But Why Though and Podfix networks.
Check them out to hear more content from other great podcasters.
Hello and welcome to the Beer and Pretzel podcast. My name is Austen. I'm your host and game master. In this podcast, we play different indie role-playing games. We play group games with the whole Beer and Pretzel podcast cast, and I also play solo role-playing games on this show. We also do reviews of the different games that we play and talk to some of the game creators, which is what this episode is all about. I'm here with Brian, who is the creator of Neon Lords of the Toxic Wasteland. Thanks very much for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's going to be exciting. I'm very looking forward to this.
This is going to be one of those games that goes a little bit different in one of the different genres that we haven't played yet. We try to play different kinds of genres, playing, of course, a traditional fantasy, going to sci-fi, westerns, more comedy-based games. But this is going to be one that I'm going to ask you about the inspirations for this game. But for me, when I was reading it, I got a lot of a combination of Mad Max sprinkled in with kind of like the Borderlands games. I'm not sure if that's kind of like what you were going for. Like, what kinds of media inspiration in writing this game for like books, movies, or video games led to this game in terms of its stylization? And can you talk about what made you want to create within this genre for your RPG?
Yeah, so a big inspiration was like Italian post-apocalyptic movies. That was huge, like Mad Max. Judge Dredd is really big. RoboCop, like on the movie side of things. And then game-wise, it was a big 80s Games Workshop, like original Rogue Trader Warhammer 40K, and then like some of the standalone games, like Chainsaw Warrior is like a solo board game that I like a lot. That was a big influence on it. And pretty much anything that like I liked, I kind of like tossed in at like some point somewhere in the game.
So did you say that Italian, was it sci-fi or monster movies you said that led to this?
It was Italian post-apocalyptic movies.
So do you have any suggestions on different movies to watch in preparation for this?
Yeah, so there is a whole slew of Italian post-apocalyptic movies. A big one is 2019 After the Fall of New York is like a big one. New Bronx Warriors is another big one. America 3000. And then like if you like not necessarily post-apocalyptic, but Turbo Kid.
Oh yes,
really big.
That's a great movie.
Like that was, yeah, I love Turbo Kid. That was a huge influence on it. And then what was that one? Kung Fury.
Oh my God, Kung Fury! I love that movie.
Yeah, so it was like, I mean, it's not. I don't necessarily would consider those two like crazy influences. More along the lines of just like kindred spirits, because it kind of fell in line with like my like sensibilities and like taste when it comes to like media.
Sure, no, that makes sense. It kind of helped shape you to be the writer that you are today. Not necessarily you're writing in that exact genre, but there's things that you like, and you like to write something similar to that.
Yep, exactly.
And speaking of which, kind of with every creative person, every creator has some kind of origin story of how they became the person that creates what they like to create, be it writing in books, games, video games, whatnot. What led you down this path to becoming a tabletop RPG writer?
So we were in the middle of a 5th edition campaign, and I was just like getting 5th edition fatigue that I know everybody at one point gets. I really wanted to play like a Masters of the Universe style RPG, and then like I didn't really go out and look for one. I kind of like started writing my own, but then it kind of just went post-apocalyptic, went like cassette futurism with some Running Man and Predator and Commando, Rambo. Like it just started like having its like, it kind of like got legs and just kind of ran on its own.
And speaking of 5th edition fatigue, because I've been there. That's where I came up with the idea for this podcast. Was that fifth edition is great, D&D is great. It's what led me sort of actually in a lot of ways. It kind of led me to the point where I like to write different RPGs or even movies and stuff just from playing D&D the first time when I was like 10 or so. But I made this podcast because there's so many other great games out there. So kind of on the same line as talking about movies, some people have the idea, I don't know if it's true or not, that big blockbusters, the ones with the familiar IPs, are slowly pushing out the smaller budget films out of theaters to make more room for more screens and seats for people to watch their bigger budget films. While Dungeons & Dragons has done a ton for the RPG community, and there's a reason why it's the most popular RPG in the world, of course, do you feel at the same time its popularity has also hurt indie RPG creators at the same time, sort of? Because unlike with movies, there's a lot of indie creators out there making their own movies, and obviously they don't get paid the same amount as like someone directing the next Transformers movie, but most RPG writers aren't able to have a career as an RPG writer. They have to do it as like a side gig or even as a hobby. So do you think Dungeons & Dragons has hurt RPG creation at the same time, or not really?
I don't think so, honestly. Like, I think it's opened up a lot more doors, especially with the open gaming license. Like, Wizards of the Coast puts out the rule set for people to make their own games with. So, like, in that regard, I feel like they've helped a lot. And realistically, in the sense of like we're like fifth edition fatigue, people get that and then they branch out to other things. So I think it's a good gateway game
Hmm.
into like role playing games, because then it's like, okay, well, Dungeons and Dragons is cool, but like, what else is out there?
Yeah, very true. Yeah, good gateway game that kind of leads to check out different genres and different kinds of mechanics and stories that you can create with other games.
Yep.
Speaking of mechanics, the game mechanics in your game is based off, I gotta double check, but it said the BX system, which is something I've personally never played. So can you go into what is that, what RPGs inspired this game's mechanics and perhaps setting?
Yeah. So BX is the basic edition Dungeons and Dragons that came out like the early '80s. It's kind of like a stripped down um, D&D back when Advanced Dungeons and Dragons and like basic were kind of like together at the same time, like a junior set to the advanced rules. And then so like I kind of based it off that. That's kind of like that was like the foundation, and I kind of just built from there. I added my like my own mechanics, and then Dungeon Crawl Classics was a huge influence. Like would they have like they have a lot of like they use a lot of tables and stuff. So that like inspired me to add a bunch of tables, and then they do a critical hit table for like the dice chain. So like the higher up, like the more strong you are, you determine what critical hit table you have. But for us, each class has their own critical hit table. So it's not generic for the classes. Like it's class specific, and it's more flavorful for each one.
On writing, because this is actually probably, once we play this, is probably going to be, well, we did play Alien, but this is probably one of the bigger books that we've played. We traditionally usually play much smaller games, and this is a 200 plus page book. So since you did this mostly by yourself, can you talk about like managing writing and be able to squeeze in with what I assume is you also have your normal job and family life and everything. So can you talk about starting kind of like at the beginning of like how are you able to create this fairly large game? It was very impressive, like how much you're able to put in it and like how long it took and just the process in general.
Thank you for the kind words. Yeah, 250 pages exactly in the book. I don't know. It's just like mostly weekends. It took me about 2 years to write it, and I just like would sit down. At first, it was like all over the place. It was like, well, today I want to write about this. Today I want to write about that. But then I had to get more specific and be like, okay, I need to finish this section. I need to finish this section. And then like I kind of just had a basic outline of like what I wanted, and then just filled out each section as I went. And then the big thing, which like was good and bad at the same time, was towards the end I started just writing right into the layout like the book layout program, which is not a good idea because then if it's gone, you know, like usually I write in Google Docs, so like it's saved into the cloud and stuff, and I can get it on my phone if I have notes or anything. But if it's on the laptop and like the laptop goes and dies, then the book's gone, you know.
Mm.
So like it was like a double-edged sword, but it was just so much easier just to be laying out a page and then like seeing, okay, well I have like half a page left, like what can I put in that spot, and then just write it up on the fly. That definitely helped, but hurt.
Since you spent like 2 years working on it, something that when I'm like writing like different like short film scripts or just work on different projects in general, something that, at least for me, I'm sure other creative people as well, is hard is trying to stay on top with the one thing you're trying to get done. Over this 2-year period, did you have struggles like sometimes go, oh, maybe now I want to try this different kind of game, or I want to start working on this, or I'm getting sick of writing this, so I'm going to take a long period of time off because I've been working on this for so long?
Yeah, a little bit. Not as bad as I usually get. Like I was surprisingly pretty focused. I'm pretty shocked that I got 250 pages completed. But like, yeah, usually like I would bounce around like a billion different ideas. But then like sometimes like a mechanic, like I was like, oh man, I wish I could do that mechanic, but it was like way too late in the process of like making it that it was like, well, that's not gonna happen. So like some of that happened a lot, but other times it either got added to the page count, what kept making it get bigger, or it just got put to the side. Or a lot of times it was more along the lines of adventure, like adventure ideas. It's like, oh, that would make a real cool adventure. And then I would write up a little paragraph and it would be in a Google Doc somewhere, and then I would come back, you know, I'll come back to it eventually. Or so like the next two big supplemental books I'm thinking about doing is like a deities, like a gods, like the Pantheon supplement, and like vehicles is another supplement. So like a lot of times some stuff it's like, okay, I'll save that for this book, or I'll save that for this book. So that kind of helped a lot too in keeping it more focused.
Vehicles, that sounds kind of something that'll be really fun to implement into this more. So when you're thinking vehicles, and obviously you have not written out fully yet, like what line are you kind of going with? Are you kind of going with like super crazy like Borderlands kind of vehicles, or Mad Max style, or more grounded like Fallout sort of? Or what are you thinking for this world would make sense for vehicles?
The mostly the vehicles I've started on was like skateboards and BMX bikes. Like I did there like last month I threw out on itch like like skateboard light rules that just mess around with, but I know um like putting stickers on them and stuff like has different abilities. But yeah, like so I was thinking like really small from skateboard all the way up to like the Ninja Turtle party wagon, like kind of like that, like Mad Max, like hodgepodge kind of like vehicles rolling around, all the way up to like some like alien tech vehicles. I was gonna kind of go all over the place with it. I think like kind of just another big book full of crazy stuff.
With writing an RPG, did you do the game layout, or was someone else hired to do that?
No, I did the layout.
Oh, you did? Okay. Okay, so that kind of works perfect for my next question. So in writing this, which I assume is your like big, or maybe it's your first and only RPG you've done so far, or maybe there's been other smaller ones, but I assume this is the biggest game you've created, right?
Yeah, yep.
So what was the hardest part of this? Because of course, besides writing, it sounds like you just said you did the game layout, but you also had to do a lot in terms of setting up and designing a Kickstarter. I'm sure you did a lot for stuff online, like media, like getting together a good Facebook group to build a community. Like, what is the hardest hat to put on and try to do well to help your game succeed?
It's definitely marketing, doing the social medias, and like getting yourself out there, because you could have literally like the Mona Lisa of RPGs, and nobody's gonna play it if they don't know you exist.
Exactly.
Like that's the problem. Like there's a lot of games out there, so it's like differentiate, like yeah, that word, like making yourself stand out when it comes to like other games is a huge thing. Like, because then you got to be like, well, why play X when I have Y? You know, you have to convince them that they need X. Is a big thing, and just getting like the name out there, because like, I mean, we got a pretty good community online. Like it's not like huge, but like they're very animate and they like the game a lot, which is awesome. And then like we just went to PAX Unplugged in the beginning of December, like mid December, and I mean we ran games the whole weekend, and like we had full tables every time, but nobody heard of the game, you know. So it's like, well, yeah, I mean I'm out there, but like it's hard. It's unfortunately hard to like with putting no money into like advertising and marketing and stuff.
It's just kind of like with a movie. There's plenty of great movies out there that just bombed just because, unfortunately, the marketing department didn't do a good job of getting the word out there on it, and not enough people saw it. And there's a ton of amazing RPGs out there, but maybe if that's not your forte, it might not get played as much, even if it's a terrific game.
Right, exactly. Yeah, like the 2012 Dread movie, like it's like the perfect
Exactly.
movie, but like it bombed in the box office.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we're never going to get that sequel, probably.
No, I know there was talks of like a TV show, but I doubt that's gonna happen.
Oh, that'd be really cool though if that happens. So in orchestrating the art layout, so something that stands out a lot for Neon Lords is a stylization of its art, which is like, drenched in bright neon colors, very stylized and cartoonish. In working with your artist, how does a collaboration between you guys work, and how did you find the right guy for what was initially in your head when you were writing the game?
So when it came to art, Mustafa's the guy who did 80% of all the art, and I saw like a T-shirt he did for like a murder hobo that had that like grim dark like old Hammer like 80s Games Workshop style that like I knew I wanted. I was like, that's the look that I need. And then I kind of like pitched, elevator pitched in the game and kind of explained like, well, this character, like this class does this, this class is this. And then he like tossed up a couple sketches and like he got it instantly. He's like, got the concept, got like the post-apocalyptic cassette futurism like vibe, and then like it clicked from there for Mustafa. But then like everyone else that I kind of grabbed, I like saw them online or like on Instagram or something. And I was like liked their style, and then like I did the same thing, like kind of like pitched them. It's like, okay, for like, could you do like this? Like Chris Carmen did the Bixby Snyder art in the book, and like I was like, I need, like I explained him what I needed, and he like nailed it every time. Everybody I worked with nailed it like perfectly. I couldn't have asked for better artists, honestly.
I definitely love the stylization of it, and it definitely feels like you had a perfect idea of what you wanted, and they did a great job of delivering it. So, since we've already talked a little bit about the mechanics, some inspiration that led to the game, something I guess we haven't talked about that we probably should do is that for those who have not played or even heard about your game, that maybe are just listening to this kind of blindly, can you go over like a pitch of like, if you like this kind of game or this kind of movie, like this is kind of what the game is about, and set it and whatnot?
Yeah, so it's like I was saying, post-apocalyptic cassette futurism, to where there was a big war in the early 90s. I think 92 we said it, and then so the technology from like the late 80s early 90s has far surpassed us as like the humans that live on the earth now, like thousands or millions of years into the future, where it's been like magic added to it, so like more of like a sci-fi fantasy element to 80s technology, if that makes any sense. With some Mad Max added in, and Escape from New York, and Master of the Universe, um just wild 80s-ness all thrown in a blender and then shot out of a shotgun while listening to some heavy metal, I guess.
And just the name alone, Neon Lords of Toxic Wasteland, you kind of get what you're going to play just by that title. And also something I really like and love, actually, is the different group of classes you can pick from. So there's, I believe, 11 or 12 with the secret class in it. And it's just an amazing group of different kinds of classes. Definitely not like your typical Dungeons and Dragons. There is a cyborg horse race, the Brudicorn, cyber skin Ronald Reagan, star spawn aliens, and more. And while I'm sure it's kind of like picking your favorite child or kid, Gun to your head, what is the favorite class that you're most proud of creating?
My favorite is the Heather class. So Heather is an acronym for Hellcat Eradication and Termination Heavy Enhanced Rangers. And they were a small unit employed during the Neon Wars that kind of like fell to the wayside, and then they found their super soldier serum, and then they came back into the modern age for the game. And then what better way to live a life as a Heather now and then to adventure. So I like their backstory, and then they're really good at like using rifles, and then they can like affix like a Rambo knife onto the end of their um rifle, and then they're pretty good at melee as well. And they got some pretty cool abilities. They're my favorite. And then my second favorite, if I have to choose one real fast, is the Cosmic Barbarian, just because they, snort cosmic dust to get their barbarian rage.
Yeah. Do you have any plans in the future for different RPGs, or right now are you only focused on different supplements for Neon Lords?
I wouldn't mind doing another game, but I don't really know what it would be at this point.
Mm.
I definitely like supplements because there's like so much like you can explore in this in like this universe of it, like the 80s 90s nostalgia mixed with science fiction fantasy. Like there's just it's insane like the amount of stuff. Like I still come up with ideas like 250 pages later, and I'm still coming up with stuff. Like definitely gonna stick with Neon Lords for a while.
Yeah, speaking of which, so when you just said 250 pages is the main book for people to play around with, but you are still developing different ideas. When you were just working on the main book before work on everything else, was there like different, like maybe different chapters or different rules or different ideas you wanted to put in there that you were like, all right, this is going to take too long if I keep adding all these ideas, so I need to start cutting this stuff out?
No, I actually did not cut anything. I think it was actually surprisingly like a pretty easy process. Like some other like projects I've had, throughout my life of other stuff that just never made it, like writing a movie or trying to start a zine or something, like just never gets off the ground because you got like, your mind goes a million different places and you could just never get like one thing done. But I don't know, for some reason, like this book was just in me and it just came out, and it was like scarily easy to get it done.
What are you playing right now, if you ever have time to, besides your own games, and I'm sure play testing different things and introducing players to your game? Are you playing any other games, D&D or other RPGs right now, or not really?
I know we're trying to get an alien game going, like with my local buddies, and like Cyberpunk is always I always want to get that going too. But unfortunately, it's Neon Lords 24/7 for me. I gotta just keep with the brand. And like what little time I have, like I have to devote it to playing, which kind of stinks, but it's the nature of the beast, really. At this point, I just end up collecting RPG books and then looking at them rather than get to play them.
Yeah, same. Yeah, they look pretty on your shelf, but who knows if you'll ever get the chance to actually play them.
Yeah.
And that's something that a lot of creators say, is that they try to get the chance to play other games, but they're so busy working on their own game they don't have time, obviously. So how much like play testing, at least for your game, went into it before you were like, okay, this is ready to get released officially?
I'd say we play tested up through the Kickstarter, probably like realistically play tested all the way up to the final draft that right before it got sent out to the printer, really. When the PDF got done with the bookmarks and everything. And then, there's some like last minute tweaks that I wanted to do, like we found in play testing. It's like, all right, well, maybe I'll change it. And then it kind of just I had to like lock it in because like I could have tweaked the game forever, but at some point you gotta just be like, that's enough. That's good.
And for RPG writers out there, inspiring RPG writers, what single piece of advice would you give someone who wants to jump into the world of writing their own game?
I would say just like stick with it. Like don't quit. Just keep writing. Even if you write like a sentence a day, just as long as you keep the engine of progress running, like and just keep going, you'll eventually get a book. you'll eventually get it done.
Awesome. And where can people find Neon Lords of Toxic Wasteland? I'm sure there's a couple, but where are the main places people can check it out, but also you and maybe any other things that you've been working on and will work on?
So the drive-through RPG is big. That's where the PDF is. Unfortunately, we do not have a print-on-demand version yet. It's like a whole formatting issue that's boring and technical stuff. So there's no print on demand of that yet. But if you go to gamefound.com, for late backers, I ordered a bunch of extra books. So there's a bunch of hardcovers floating around that people can snag up until they're all gone.
That's awesome. And Brian, thank you very much for coming on our show and talking about Neon Lords of Toxic Wasteland.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me. It was really fun.
And to our listeners, I will be putting down the drive-through RPG. And what was the other place people can get the hardcover copy of it?
Gamefound.com, or you can literally just message me on Facebook and I will get you one.
Oh, awesome. I'll put some links down in the description below where to check out Brian and Neon Lords of Toxic Wasteland. And we have episodes out every week, every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. and most Fridays at 10 a.m. And if you enjoyed this episode, stay tuned because I'm going to be playing the solo rules for Neon Lords. And once our group comes back, if you've been missing the rest of the group, apologize to that. Some of our members have been getting COVID, so it's been tough to get everyone together as COVID has been rising, unfortunately, in Vermont, where we're based out of. So right now, it's going to be a lot of solo games in the near future, but with that, I'll be playing Neon Lords of Toxic Wasteland very soon on our spin-off show, Forever a Gnome. Thanks for listening, and we'll hear from you next time on the Beer and Pretzel Podcast.